Blackbeard may have Davy's blood, but does he really carry his will? Will he be the one to fulfill the dream of Davy, the promise of Davy? Or maybe it'll be someone else entirely. The God Valley flashback has been full of loads of unexpected lore reveals, but one of the best has been the presence of Teach. We found out that a young Teach was present at God Valley during the time of the legendary incident and witnessed far too many horrors for a boy his age. First being captured and forced to participate as a human target in a sick native hunting game, bearing the scorn of the celestial dragons for simply carrying the Davy D name, witnessing his relatives being turned into demons out to kill him, hearing his own mother promise to kill him and herself should they be recaptured, and then the horror of finding your own father demonified, hell-bent on killing you and your mother. In just a small number of chapters, it's given us a keen insight as to why Blackbeard may be the way that he is. His brutal and greedy personality may never be fully redeemed, but at least we understand why he has turned out the way that he has. Experiencing such terror and loss from a young age, it's not hard to imagine anybody would turn out the same way. And while we may empathize with this young boy, is the man that he has become fit to carry on Davy's will? Lore reveals concerning Davy D. Jones is one of those other great surprises coming out of the God Valley flashback. And while it is still a mystery as to who this man really was, we've been given some major clues. Perhaps most significantly, a strong suggestion that Davy D. Jones and Joy Boy are likely not the same person. When Rox taunts Imu about who Imu is scared of most, Rox lists both Davy and Joy Boy, as if to suggest that they are two separate people. He explicitly asks, Davy D. Jones or Joy Boy? That word "or" heavily suggesting he's talking about two different figures. Although we could also interpret this as if Rox is referring to the two personas or alter egos of one same person. Who are you scared of most? Superman or Clark Kent? Batman or Bruce Wayne? Joy Boy or Davy D. Jones? And if you do want a deeper dive into the identity of Davy D. Jones and whether or not he's the same person as Joy Boy, then you can watch my other videos on the topic. But for the focus of today, my bigger question is Blackbeard the inheritor of Davy's will? And to answer this question, it may not even matter as to whether Davy D. Jones and Joy Boy were the same person or not, because even if they were and the two names only referred to separate personas or egos of the same person, this would still suggest that the two personas are distinct enough to warrant people to attribute different qualities to each persona, thereby meaning both Joy Boy and Davy D. Jones could have a will of their own that can be inherited. And this is important because a huge focus within chapter 1164 was this idea of Davy's will. In that chapter, Oda used Davy's will, Davy's dream, and Davy's promise almost interchangeably, seemingly all three terms being used to talk about this idea that someone would inherit the spirit of Davy D. Jones's will to fulfill a promise that Davy once made, supposedly to bring about Davy's dream. And of course we know that these are not new ideas in One Piece. The ideas of inherited will, a person's dream, the fulfilling of an age-old promise are central themes that propel the story forward. The entire story began with a promise by Luffy to his mentor and role model Shanks to become a great pirate that would surpass even the late Pirate King, which would become Luffy's goal and dream, while Shanks recognized from this declaration that Luffy had indeed inherited the will of the man he had just promised to surpass. And as the series has grown and expanded, Luffy's dream has also matured. We now know that becoming Pirate King is actually just one necessary step to a bigger, grander dream. And Luffy has not only inherited the will of Roger, but also seemingly that of Joy Boy's. In which case, who is the inheritor of Davy D. Jones's will? Before we unpack this further, a shout out to Honkai Star Rail, the sponsor of today's video. Honkai Star Rail is a free-to-play multi-platform RPG from Hoyoverse, the geniuses behind Genshin. With its carefully crafted music and graphics in an ever-expanding space fantasy universe spanning thousands of years, you've gotta get amongst it. Right now the story is set in Amphorius, a Mediterranean mythological world full of the tragic but fantastical, gorgeous but apocalyptic lore One Piece fans love. A world where titans used to protect the world who have since been corrupted by the black tide of doom. Your mission follows the journey journey of the Astral Express crew as they join forces with the Chrysos heirs on an epic journey. And in newly released version 3.7, meet the true and unleashed form of final heroine Cyrene. Cyrene, also known by many epithets including the Priest of Time or the Emanator of Remembrance. And just like her title suggests, this playable character blends beauty with lore, with action, with grace. A stunningly designed character with a rich backstory, this final heroine of the Amphorius arc is graceful and elegant, soft and healing, and resolute to help you and the team save Amphorius. You might remember her from earlier versions in her mem form and her girl form, but look at this glow up. As an ice-type character, Cyrene is great to have as a support for the Chrysos heirs. Her combat arsenal and playstyle includes providing additional true DMG for the entire team, customized buffs for the 12 Chrysos heirs and the Trailblazer. She consumes Recollection to summon Memo Sprites, which can boost the damage dealt by your team. But that's not all. Version 3.7 gives you instant rewards. Returning players will receive double Stellar Jades up to a maximum of 1600 Jades, while everyone will get one Golden Companion Spirit token right away, which you can use to claim a free 5-star character, including Topaz, who's been added to the list of exchangeable characters. Also during this version 3.7, 6 popular characters are returning, with Castorus, Tribble, and Hyacine already launched and more coming from 26th of November. There's also incredible world building with new events, new areas, and new enemies. And if you log in for 7 days, you can also claim 10 special passes which you can use to pull for Cyrene. And you can also download the game using my custom link in the description box below and use the limited redemption code you see on screen for an extra 50 Stellar Jades. So what are you waiting for? Download Honkai Star Rail now and let's get saving Amphorius. Thanks Honkai. I have to say that for a majority of the time since Teach's presence at God Valley was revealed, perhaps even longer than that, I was thinking that Oda was pointing us to the revelation that Luffy and Blackbeard have the inherited wills of Joy Boy and Davy D. Jones respectively. After all, in chapter 1156, Rox made a comment that he was after 2 devil fruits, in which case some of the more obvious possibilities for which 2 devil fruits he was referring to include the Yami Yami no Mi and the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika. In the case of the Yami Yami no Mi, we know that Blackbeard invested a great deal to acquire this devil fruit, purposely joining Whitebeard's crew to increase his chances of coming across it, and then committing the fratricide of a fellow Nakama, a brother, in order to wield the fruit's powers for himself. This level of dedication indicating at the fruit's specialness, a special reason as to why Blackbeard wanted it. And considering many other areas of Blackbeard's life where his late father has played a large influence, such as the name of his ship, the Saber of Zebek, taking over Hachinosu, the pirate island formerly ruled over by Rox, and the same shared dream of wanting to become the king of the world, it's not hard to assume that the devil fruit that Blackbeard pursued for most of his life is also the same fruit that his own father desired. Whereas in the case of the Nika devil fruit, well, this requires a slightly longer discussion, which mind you, I have discussed in full before, so if you like a deeper dive into that, then please feel free to watch this video next. But given that as to one of those 2 devil fruits, Rox mentioned it would be best consumed by Harold as the king of Elbaf, and as we know, Elbaf did have a legendary devil fruit that has been passed down the royal family for generations. However, when King Harold was mysteriously murdered 14 years ago, this legendary devil fruit was stolen, only for shortly after Shanks to find the so-called Gomu Gomu no Mi in the possession of the Cypher Pole agents, from whom he stole the devil fruit, only for that fruit to be consumed by Luffy. And well, we all know the story there. That innocuous devil fruit turned out to be none other than the legendary Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, a devil fruit that gave Luffy the same incredible powers that Joy Boy himself is said to have wielded. All of which is to say, there is strong evidence within the series to suggest that Luffy and Blackbeard's devil fruits are the ones that Rox was looking for, in which case it could also be easy to assume that that also means Luffy and Blackbeard have inherited the respective wills of Joy Boy and Davy. And in the case of Luffy and Joy Boy, that almost feels confirmed by this point. But as the God Valley flashback now comes to a close, and with the tragic end to Rox's legendary life, it's hard not to question whether Blackbeard is a worthy guy to follow in Rox's footsteps. The narrative that Oda has woven suggests that Rox was the failed inheritor inheritor of Davy's will, much in the same way that Rox was the failed successor of Joy Boys. Rox, like Roger, was too early. In another life, in another time, Rox and Roger may have been the promised ones, but they weren't. They were too early, they weren't ready. Instead, Roger paved the way for Luffy. But does it feel right to say that Rox did the same for Blackbeard? Like I said at the beginning, this flashback has made Blackbeard a much more sympathetic character. But I doubt that I'm alone in thinking that these experiences, as tragic and traumatic as they are, can never fully absolve him for his actions. At the end of the day, that's rarely Oda's point. One Piece is full of villains whose tragic past make them more understandable, more nuanced, but not redeemed. Doflamingo, Orochi, Arlong, all antagonists we feel for, but nevertheless condemn. In Blackbeard's case, he stabbed his fellow crewmate in the back, killing Thatch and thus breaking a sacred rule of the Whitebeard pirates. He turned in another fellow Nakama, Ace, to the Marines, which was the catalyst that eventually resulted in both Ace and Whitebeard's death. In the case of Whitebeard, he himself killed his former captain. A captain who was not only a captain, but also a surrogate father who took in an orphan Teach. A man who gave Teach a home and a family. In fact, witnessing the God Valley events, the relationship between Teach and Whitebeard only becomes more tragic and more twisted. We saw Whitebeard stand up for Teach's father, standing by Rox's side, prepared to take on the so-called world. Even when Rox was turned, it was clear it hurt Whitebeard to stand in his way, seemingly reluctant to truly fight his Domi Reversied captain/friend. While the Rox Pirates has been described and indeed portrayed to be a crew full of strife and conflict, a bunch of opportunists who had no qualms betraying each other. I don't know about you, but the relationship between Whitebeard and Rox always felt different. And Rox was certainly not the brutal, evil villain that the world government would have us believe. While initially introduced as a sort of maniacal fiend, hell-bent on ruling the world, the Rox that we witnessed was a stand-up guy. Loyal, fearsome, and brutal, but not cruel. Ambitious, but not necessarily greedy. He stood up for his friends, as clearly seen through his interactions with Harold, or the way that he would often defend Harold, and there was not a single drop of cowardice in his body. But the apple fell very far from the tree. Cowardice and disloyalty are definitely words you would associate with Blackbeard. It's some of his most defining characteristics, which is why we have to wonder, is he fit to be the next Davy? And I think many of us would say no. Blackbeard is simply not that guy. But I also have to say, I do go back and forth. Especially because the idea of two leading figures with opposing ideologies banding together to fight a greater common enemy, that is a very common trope. We've seen it within One Piece itself very recently between Garp and Roger at God Valley. Garp and Roger, the marine and pirate who needed no words to decide they would need to fight together to stop Rox. Or another comparison I and many other One Piece fans have made is to the Naruto series. Towards the end of Naruto, we see the protagonist Naruto and the Judoragonist Sasuke unite to fight the final villain, Kaguya. Despite holding opposing ideologies and having been rivals/enemies for much of the series, Naruto and Sasuke put their differences aside, defeating Kaguya together. It's only after this final boss is defeated that Naruto and Sasuke have their own final battle to settle the score, at which point Naruto wins, not by physically overwhelming Sasuke, but by wearing him down with his unwavering beliefs. In a way, winning Sasuke over. Following this, Sasuke even becomes the Shadow Hokage, taking on a hugely important role within the Konoha village despite having committed various grave acts as an antagonist throughout the series. Now, I'm not saying this is definitely what we'll see with Blackbeard, but it is certainly a possibility. And if One Piece does indeed take this route, some fans may complain about Oda so-called copying Kishimoto or leaning into an overused trope, but I don't think that's true for a number of reasons, which we could dedicate an entire separate discussion on in the future, so I won't get into it for now. Instead, keeping on track, the possibility of Blackbeard being Luffy's final opponent in the series has been long debated by the fanbase. Ever since Imu was introduced, we've all considered the possible plotline of Luffy and Blackbeard being forced to team up to defeat the final boss, while Luffy subsequently defeats Blackbeard to prove once and for all, Luffy Luffy's dreams, his ideals are right. After all, that's a core theme that underscores the battles in One Piece. As early as SBS Volume 4, in Chapter 30, when asked why Luffy doesn't kill his opponents, Oda said that in this era, men live by their dreams and beliefs, risking their lives to defend them. By defeating his opponents, Luffy is also shattering their dreams and beliefs, a defeat that is just as bad as death. It isn't necessary to physically kill them. And we know that Blackbeard is a man that similarly believes in this era of dreams and considers it just as important. So yeah, I have to say that the possibility of seeing a Luffy and Blackbeard versus Imu before the ultimate Luffy versus Blackbeard showdown is highly likely. But I have also come across a very interesting counterpoint. Another core theme within the series is that the person to inherit your dreams, to inherit your will not necessarily be your child. In fact, chances are it probably won't be your own son. We see this very clearly in the case of the Monkey D family, 3 generations of men, each belonging to a different opposing faction. Garp the Marine hero, Dragon the revolutionary leader, Luffy a pirate captain. In the case of Ace, despite Roger's hopes and belief that it would be his son to carry on his will to become the next pirate king and uncover the One Piece, Ace didn't want this for himself at all, this dream and will instead being inherited by Luffy, the grandson of Roger's own rival. So it's also very keeping with the story and its core themes of inherited will and chosen family that Teach may not in fact be the one to inherit the Davy D will. And here I'm also reminded of a very important line. It's not you. The man that Goldie Roger was waiting for, it's not you, Teach. Not a damn chance. Just as there are people out there who inherited Roger's will, soon enough, someone will carry on in Ace's name as well. You may try and destroy their spirit, but you will never extinguish their flame. So it has been, and so it will continue to be until the very end of time. The dream and will of Davy is clearly one that has been passed down the generations and will continue to do so. And while the clear answer is that Luffy is the one, Luffy is that guy, but what about in respect of Davy's will? Even if we go back and say that Joy Boy and Davy Jones are the same person and there is only one will that defines them, what about Rox's will? And to consider all of this, I think we also have to remember whose backstory we're witnessing in the first place. Yes, the recent chapters have taken us on a thrilling journey through the much anticipated God Valley incident, but remember that at the end of the day, this is actually Loki's story. This is Loki's arc. And Loki, well, he's a character with whom our relationship has been quite similar to that of our relationship with Rox. At the beginning, his introduction was that of an accursed prince, the shame of Elbaf, a wicked and dangerous giant, blamed for killing his own father and believed to bring about the end of the world. And yet, what have we seen? Well, Loki's story isn't complete yet, but it's getting clearer and clearer that, similar to Rox, what we've been told about Loki doesn't hold up. His birth and early childhood is as tragic as it gets, despised and abandoned by his own mother, literally thrown off a cliff by the person who's supposed to love and care for him the most, ostracized by the rest of the kingdom due to their misunderstanding caused by his own mother, this depraved childhood helping us empathize with his violent exterior, understanding that his actions are just that of a lonely and sad boy acting out. But unlike Blackbeard, it doesn't seem like Loki is actually responsible for the atrocities he's blamed to have caused, or at the very least, he's not responsible for the grave sin of killing his own father and the king of Elbaf. In fact, much like Rox, who at his core was actually an honorable guy, Loki seems to be quite similarly honorable, loyal, and compassionate. We've seen glimpses of this in his friendship with Mosa, being genuinely upset over what happened to his father, or even him turning down the God's Knights, recognizing the celestial dragons for what they are. Before we were taken on the wild journey that was the God Valley flashback, Oda made sure that we witnessed something else first. Loki. Loki for who he is, not just what we've been told he is. In which case, and perhaps most important of all, what else have we seen via Loki's flashback? Loki's relationship with Rox. Much like a young Luffy adored Shanks, Loki idolized Rox, looked up to him like Rox was his ultimate role model, hanging upon his every word, repeatedly asking to join Rox's crew. The parallels between Loki and Luffy are very clear, and much in the same way that Roger passed on his will to Shanks, who then passed it down to Luffy, the picture being painted was that of Rox's will being passed down to Loki. These core themes of found families, chosen families, and inherited will not necessarily being passed down one's family line are very much present in the case of Rox and Loki. And I'm sure that you'll remember that before the God Valley portion of the flashback began, we were all thinking that Loki, as the inheritor of Rox's will, would be the one to fight alongside Luffy in that final battle, especially given the Harley mural, which suggests that there would be a giant fighting alongside the reincarnated sun god. But then to make things even more nuanced, because of course One Piece is a richly nuanced and beautifully complex story, it's also true that more than one person can inherit your will. We see this clearly with Shanks and Luffy both inheriting Roger's will, Sabo and Luffy carrying on Ace's will, Oden's will being passed down to the Scabbards, Yamato, and Momonosuke. So it's entirely possible that both Blackbeard and Loki have inherited Rox's will, but there is clearly a case to be made that in Blackbeard's case, he has a twisted, misinterpreted view of Rox's will and the Davy dream, leading us to some very interesting storylines for the future. Perhaps even an interaction between Loki and Blackbeard and their differing ideologies as to what Rox would have really wanted. But those are just some of the thoughts that I've had recently. I would love to hear your take on this. So please do let me know your thoughts on the question, who is the inheritor of Davy D. Jones's will, by leaving a comment below. I want to shout out New Horizons 241 because this comment on a previous video got me rethinking about the inherited will of Davy and who may really be Davy D. Jones's successor. And it got me searching online for other people's takes, and I found that I'm definitely not the only one thinking along these lines. For example, I came across a really interesting Reddit post by 69 Great White Bags, and lol, love the name, but this post also brought up some really good points about Morganeers versus Peacemains, which if you don't know is an early concept that Oda played around with within his one-shots Romance Dawn, which you can think of as the prototypes for the One Piece series. In Oda's earlier ideas for the series, pirates were split up into two groups, good guys and the bad guys, Peacemains and the Morganeers. And Whitebag's point is that Rox was clearly a Peacemain, or at the very least, definitely not a Morganeer, while Blackbeard is clearly a Morganeer. Loki, similarly, not a Morganeer. Ergo, Loki inherited Rox's will, not Blackbeard. Obviously, Oda has dropped the whole Morganeer and Peacemain dichotomy, and One Piece has a much more nuanced portrayal of pirates. But I did still find it very interesting to read, so I'll link it in the description box in case you want to read it for yourself. Whitebags also shares some other theories and takes in that post, some of which I have actually myself discussed previously, like the possibility of Loki's devil fruit, or Loki not having a devil fruit at all. So please do feel free to go watch that discussion too. But if you've enjoyed today's discussion, please like and share the video. Please also do subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on any other One Piece discussions, and also to help out a fellow One Piece fan get to 100,000 subscribers, I'd really appreciate it. You can also help support the channel further by becoming a Patreon or channel member like these wonderful people. As always, thank you so much for listening to another one of my crazy One Piece ramblings. This is JoyGirl, and I'll see you again soon.